Hi guys, this is Shivadi. In this session, I'm going to explain some of the Angular concepts like routing, navigation, lazy loading, and route guard. So first, let us discuss on the routing. In Angular, routing is managed by the Angular router, which allows developer to define navigation paths and load different components based on the paths what it is configured in the configure routes. Now, if you are using the Angular CLI command, if you create a new Angular project, then whenever you are generating the new project, it prompts you whether you want to go with the routing module or not. If you say yes, then by default in your application, you will able to find app-routing.module.ts. If you are not using the Angular CLI commands to generate your Angular project, then you may have to install this Angular router. Once you are install this particular Angular router, you have to configure the routes. So you can create the file name in the root folder app-routing.module.ts. Here you need to configure the paths. I'm going to explain each one with an example, so no need to worry. The next step is you have to configure the router outlet in the app.component.html file. So once you define these three steps, once you follow these three steps, then you are good to go ahead and use the routing for your application. The second one is navigation. Once you are defining these routes, how a user can navigate between the different components and how the components can navigate between the components. So navigation can be happening two places. One is on the TypeScript class, which is nothing but the in component classes. Another one is in the HTML templates. If you want to navigate in the component class, then you can use this dot router dot navigate and you can specify the path. This path has to be defined in this app-routing.module.ts. Okay. In the case of in HTML, if you want to navigate between the different routes, then you can use the anchor tag with attribute router link and you can specify the path. Once user click on this particular um, text then or hyperlink, then it automatically navigate to this particular path and it loads that particular Angular component. The next one is the route parameters. Route parameters are nothing but you need to specify what is the path, and then we also need to specify the what the component it has to load whenever this particular path is going to match. And also it's sometimes it's not only the path, even they have to pass certain parameters to the particular path as well. So in that case we can specify this particular path along with the parameter. Then as long as this particular URL is getting matched, then it automatically loads the corresponding uh, component. Then we we also by using the routes you can achieve the lazy loading. So Angular supports lazy loading, allowing modules and components to load asynchronously when the route is triggered to improve the performance. Example, now for example, certain components you no need to load as part of the application, Angular application startup. Those can be loaded on demand whenever user triggers particular path. Then at that time, if you want to dynamically load those component classes, then you can use the lazy loading. This also I will explain with an example. Now finally, we have the route guard. So these guards can be added to routes to control the access based on the certain conditions like auth guard, and also you'll have the can active, can deactive, can load. So these are going to provide the security for the certain paths before a user access, before a component is getting loaded particular component. You want to verify whether the user has proper access to access that particular path or not. Then that information or that type of checks you can do using the route guard. Now let's go ahead and see all these concepts with an example. Now first let us look at the how we can implement the routing. So in order to implement the routing, the first step is you have to go and see this app routing module.ts. Now if you see here, I have created many components to demonstrate in Angular interview question and answers. So here, this is the first one I'm talking about, app routing.module.ts. Here we need to uh, import all the components whichever you want to use for the routing. And here we talk about the routes. Each route have the two uh, property or parameters, you can say. This is the path and this is the component. And whenever user requests this particular path, then it automatically load this particular component. Now if this matches with this particular path, then it is going to load this particular component. And also just now we talk about the lazy loading. So lazy loading can be achieved through this routing. Now whenever any path which is matching with particular lazy load, then what it is going to do is it is going to dynamically load its children. Now in order to implement the lazy loading, you have to create a separate module which is nothing but here in this case I have created this as a lazy load module, and its lazy load module you are going to configure the routes which is nothing but the lazy load component. Now this lazy load component is going to be triggered only when this particular path is getting matched lazy load, then it automatically load this load children. But this particular section will not be loaded until user is going to invoke this particular path. Other things will be loaded as part of the um, Angular application startup. Okay, so this is the one important file we discussed. The second one is we have to go and see this app.component.html. Here we have to define the router dash outlet. This is the directive. You have to put this one in the root folder where you have defined the app.component.html. And the next one is once you define this one, we talk about the route configuration. This route configuration I already explained. Here we have the path and this the component. Once this is done, then any user is going to invoke this particular path, then this particular component is going to load. And also we can see the navigation part. Now in order to explain the navigation, I have created this hello world.component.html. Here there are two ways you can invoke. One is using the anchor tag, where you can specify the href and you are going to give the complete URL of the Angular application. Then you can directly, when you click on this particular hyperlink, it will open. Second one is using the anchor tag with route link. Here you just need to provide the relative path. Once you provide this particular relative path, it automatically navigate this particular path and load the component which is mapped to this particular path. Now we covered the routing, we covered the um, navigation, we also covered the lazy loading, and finally let's see how the route guard is going to work. Now in order to implement the route guard, you have to create the service, route guard service, using this command ng generate guard. Once you use this, once you run this command in the Angular CLI command line, then it is going to generate your custom route guard where you can define the logic. Now let's go ahead and see. This is the auth guard what I have implemented. So in the auth guard, it basically implementing the connector. Here we have the connector method. Inside this, you can go ahead and implement whatever the logic you want to um, implement to protect the particular um, path. Now here is authenticated true, then only it will allow, otherwise it will not allow. Now once you define this particular route guard, how you are going to map, we will see. Now let's go to the app-routing.module.ts. If you see here, this is the path hello. Here I am specifying the component as a hello world component, and connective I activated connective auth guard for this particular path. That means whenever user is trying to invoke make a request with this particular path, it first checks its auth guard logic whether it is authenticated true or not. If it is true, then only it will allow you to access that particular path. Otherwise, it automatically navigates this to this particular login page. So this is the another way how you can route this particular request or navigation. So one thing what we have seen in the HTML page, we have used the route route link to navigate between the different components. The second one is if you want to navigate from the component or the TypeScript class, then you have to use this syntax, this dot router dot navigate, and you can specify the path. Now let's go ahead and execute this particular code, and then we can see the output. Now when I'm accessing this localhost colon 4200/welcome, it's directly opening up this particular page. But let's go ahead and update is authenticated to false. Okay, now see what happens. When I'm okay, so it navigated to the login page. So if I go ahead and update this particular is authenticates again true, and if I access this welcome, then we are able to access that particular path. So this is how you can implement routing, navigation, lazy loading, and route guard. Hope this concept is clear. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.